Hey, what's up? It's Ben here. You may or may not have heard what a short squeeze is, but let me explain it to you in a general sense. You may or may not get it at first, but I'll simplify it to you so even a kid can understand. So in general, a short squeeze is an event that occurs when investors who have shorted a particular stock are forced to buy back additional shares to cover their losses. Sounds confusing, right? Don't worry, it may sound overwhelming at first, especially if you have never heard of that phrase before. But first, you will need to learn about shorting a stock, and it will be easier to understand the concept of short squeeze. So what does shorting a stock mean? Note that it's also known as short selling. It's one of the stocks trading strategies where an investor borrows a certain amount of stocks from a broker, a financial institution, or a bank and sells them at a certain high price with the hope of buying them back at a lower price in the future. This way, the investor pockets the difference between the price that they sold and the price that they bought back. If you didn't get that, don't worry. Let me explain this with an analogy, assuming we are in a perfect world. Suppose a dear friend of yours is a collector of baseball cards. These baseball cards have a certain value when you want to sell them in the market. If you think these baseball cards will go down in value for some reason, like the player sucked, or that these baseball cards will no longer be deemed valuable. So what you will do in this scenario is to short them. The way to do that is by calling up your friend and asking them to borrow their baseball cards for a while, promising a certain borrowing charge or a fee or interest for just borrowing the baseball cards. You will then sell them in the baseball card market and pocket the money. Let's say you sell them for $10,000 in total, and you promise your friend that you will pay him $500 as a borrowing charge or fee. After a certain time, your prediction comes true and the value of the baseball cards drop to, let's say, $5,500 in total. You will then return to the baseball card store and buy it back at $5,500. After that, you can go back to your friend and return the baseball cards you borrow and pay him the $500 borrowing charge or fee. At the end of this transaction, you will have pocketed $4,000 as profit because you sold the card at $10,000 and bought it back at $5,500 and then paying your friend back $500 for the borrowing charge or fee. This whole activity is known as short selling. So when you switch over to the idea of stocks, it's basically doing the same thing as the baseball cards, but with stocks. You're essentially borrowing stocks and selling them and then buying it back at a lower price. Now let's circle back to the concept of short squeeze. Continuing with the example of baseball cards. Imagine that things went south and your prediction was wrong. The baseball cards you borrowed and sold at $10,000 now went up in value and quickly became worth $15,000. Since you promised to return the $10,000 worth of baseball cards to your friend and your friend is demanding it and wanting it back, you will need to go back to the store and then buy back those cards at a higher price, in this case $5,000 more, to get the cards back so you can return them back to your friend so he or she doesn't get mad at you. This event can be known as a short squeeze. In this case, the investor faces significant loss and must cover up their position by buying back the stocks, or in this case, the baseball cards, at a high price than they sold it at to return it to its original holder. Now, this begs the question, why does a short squeeze happen in stocks? It happens when the price of a stock rises significantly in a short time frame, which triggers a chain reaction of short sellers buying back additional stocks to cover their position. As the stock prices continue to rise, the short sellers is concerned, which is when the price squeezes them out. The buying pressure and the rise in stock prices end up attracting more investors who sees the rising prices as an opportunity to buy and sell at a higher price, further fueling the short squeeze. To make matters worse, short sellers can be forced to buy even more stocks when the broker decided to call it back and ask the borrower to cover the position or put more money inside their account to be used as collateral. When this happens, it's called a margin call. The broker can force you to take certain actions if they are concerned that the risk of you defaulting on a contract or simply not having enough money in your account to make them feel safe. Now let's look at the factors that affect short squeezes. They can be driven by fundamental factors like earnings report or positive news about the company, making the stock more attractive to investors and driving up demand. Additionally, social media can be a huge driving force to increase demand. Social media and online communities like the Reddit can drive up the prices of a stock or a commodity or asset prices through careful planning. These online communities can carefully plan large movement to purchase more shares to drive up demand and increase prices. One of the most recent examples that shook the finance community with the help of online communities is the GameStop saga that happened in early 2021. In this case, a group of small retail investors on Reddit planned to buy shares of a struggling video game retailer, GameStop, since many big investors saw that this company was struggling and it could potentially go bankrupt. They started to short the stock. However, the big retail investors were no match to the coordinated efforts of the retail investors from Reddit's Wall Street Bet forums. The stock quickly rose over 500% within a span of a couple of weeks. Many investors rode the stock frenzy and profited from it. One retail investor named Keith Gill, or Deep F Value on Reddit, and Roaring Kitty on YouTube helped this movement, and Gill bagged nearly $20 million in profit from the GameStop trade. And of course, not everyone who invested are winners. Those who held it for too long ended up losing a lot of money. Some investment firms went bankrupt, and some individual investors lost all their saving from this. Therefore, it is important to consider that the stock market is full of risk, and everyone entering the market should be aware of these risks and managing them accordingly. So to sum up everything we have learned so far, a short squeeze is an event where the short sellers are forced to buy back the stock to cover their losses, which further creates more demand and pump up the stock price, overall leading large losses for short sellers. And the term squeeze refers to the pressure on the short seller to buy back these shares and closing out their position. This can be caused by factors like margin calls, positive news or earnings, or a planned social media effort. The 2021 GameStop situation highlights the risk of the stock market, and anyone looking to get involved in it should tread carefully by gaining knowledge in the stock market. So that's it for today, and if you found this video to be helpful, feel free to give it a like and maybe consider subscribing for more topics like this, and I'll catch y'all later.